Ladies, this is a heavy conversation, and I thank you all for being brave enough and vulnerable enough to share with us what you're going through and how I don't like to say how we overcome because I don't believe you overcome, but how we are all working our way through this journey of grief that we all have. I'll start with you, Bree, and work my way around. Tell me about the loss that's hunting you still.
At first, I lost my uncle, which was so, like you said, untimely. We had no idea. He had been struggling with being sick for probably like a year or two, going back and forth to the hospital, couldn't hold food down, didn't know. No one, the doctors didn't know. They would just be like, oh, it's a stomach ache and send him home. Well, I actually walked into Emory, downtown Atlanta with him. I believe it was May 20th. And within 10 days, he had passed. I
Wow.
walked into the hospital with this man. We're laughing and joking as we're waiting in the emergency room to see a doctor because he said his heart was just feeling weird. He felt like it was beating abnormally. And from that, they admitted him into the hospital within a matter of 10 days. He was diagnosed with cancer, lung cancer that had the cancer cells had then spread and moved to his heart. He had several surgeries within those days. Just seeing that, I had never seen anyone pass. And especially like you think it would take months or years, not almost less than 2 weeks. Like that was crazy. So that happened. And then like you said, within, that was my first major loss. So that took me by storm. Like, dang, I didn't really realize I could lose people. Like I know people lose people and I send my condolences all the time, but that was my first time it hit close to home.
You're detached from it.
Yeah, until it happened to me. And then shortly after, less than a year later, I lost one of my good friends, Miss Jackie O, who was young. She was a mother. She had just had her last child, which Prince wasn't even a year yet. So
how old was she?
Jackie was 32 at the time. Yeah. So we lost her last May. So she was 32. She would have been 33 this year. But yeah, we lost her untimely. She went in to have surgery, and within hours after her surgery, just a I won't say routine, but a cosmetic surgery that, I mean, being in Atlanta and being young, you hear hundreds of people get this surgery. Like I would have never thought that would be my friend's fate, you know? And with her having children, and her being my age and us being young, under 35, and she was a vegan and she was like light and she was fun. It was just like, you were healthy. Why would that? It made me question God so much because I didn't understand why. And I still struggle with it. And I haven't talked about it a lot, but that's been the one that I've been like kind of struggling with the hardest because at least with my uncle, I was like, okay, he was older. He lived a life. He smoked cigarettes. So what did we think? He was eventually going to get cancer, you know what I mean? But with Jackie, with someone who was young, a mom, vibrant, like I said, going through something that people do every day. People are having surgeries. And for it to be her fate, that really, really struck me. I would say last year, the last 6 months of the year was really, really dark for me.
In 2019, my sister was on spring break with her daughter, really close to my sister because I'm never married, never had kids. And she died suddenly in Cancun from a blood clot. I felt like the world had stopped. I tell people it doesn't matter if you've lost a parent, a child, a spouse, and everybody grieves differently, right? It's your individual grief journey. But whoever's that number one person in your life, I had never experienced that type of pain in my life. It was as if time stood still. And I just remember saying, I don't know how I'm going to be able to go forward without my sister. It was unbearable pain. And I didn't go to counseling initially. I finally probably did grief therapy about 4 or 5 years later. And then I became my mom's sole caregiver who had Alzheimer's. And grief comes in a lot of forms, right? We're talking about grieving the loss of a loved one. But you can grieve, the loss of a job or different things. And so I felt like I was grieving the loss of my mother over a 12, 13-year period because of her Alzheimer's. And then mom passed away 2 years ago. And here I am right back in the throes of it. And I coined this new term for grief. It means going right into extreme faith. And that's what happened for me. And it wasn't that I wasn't going to go to therapy. I wasn't going to use any other tools to cope. But I had to stand on my faith. Even though I questioned God, I had to trust him that he would allow me to get through that process.
Yeah. How are you getting through that process? Like, what are your day-to-day like?
It's hard from day to day. You know, the ugly cries come and go. I'm coming up on the 5th year anniversary of my sister's death. I remember having conversations with my sister just about my mom and how we would plan her funeral. And she was like, well, you never know, I might go before mom. And I'm like, girl, whatever. That'll never happen. And she was like, you just never know what life is going to throw your way. And my mother was 92. She had Alzheimer's for 13 years. I knew that day was going to come. My sister was just on vacation. I talked to her 8, 9 times a day. We were connected at the hip. She was my best friend. She was my confidant. It was the worst thing that I've ever experienced in my life. I felt like a dump truck literally ran into me and that my chest was caving in.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult navigating through sudden loss. I don't wish that on my worst enemy.
Yeah.
It's something I don't think I'll ever get over. But
that's why I never use the word closure, you know? Like, there is no closure. It is a wound that stays open. My mother lost her mother, and we all lost my grandmother, but my mother, she never came back from it fully. It was so traumatized her spirit that she never returned to who she was before that, I don't think. She, lives the life and goes about every day. My grandmother, as I talked about in the open, lost her youngest child, her oldest and her youngest, but her youngest was my father. She never came back from that. Like, she aged 10 years in a year. And we could be in the kitchen. It could be a year later, 5 years later, we could be in the kitchen and she would just be crying. And the thing is, that's the thing about tears. No one was like, oh God, y'all mama crying, everybody everybody would just keep going about their day. And she would just be sitting there weeping, wiping down the counters, cooking, folding laundry, whatever she was doing. It's like everybody kind of understood, this is all you have to give right now. Like, it was like there was no comfort for losing a child.
Can I say something else real quick too? So I'm coming up on 5 years of losing my sister, and I have been doing better. I'm working, I'm traveling. But I'm also afraid that, like, I'm forgetting how she sounds. I'm forgetting, like, all the memories are kind of fading a little bit slowly every day. And I try really hard to be intentional on watching videos. And some people are like, you're re-traumatizing yourself. But, like, I have this fear inside of me that, like, I will forget some of my sister's favorite things and the joy that we share. And it's terrifying at times. And so I'm trying to figure out how to navigate through that, of how do I keep her memory alive, still going through the grief process, but not letting it overtake me. And so that's a struggle for me right now.
Because that's a delicate balance to strike.
100%.
And you feel guilty for life going on or making new memories without those people that would have been there or been involved. Or like you said, like...
That's exactly it.
That's what it is. And like you said, when everybody keeps going and you're stuck in the grief, that's where my anger came from too. Like, how is everybody, like, the world just gonna keep going? Like, we didn't just lose this, but you're the only one who feel that immense loss.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you, Bree, I asked this of someone, and I realized what an insensitive question it is to ask. So I prefaced this with that, and I braced both of us for it. A friend of mine suffered a miscarriage, and I asked her, this was a baby you never met. You didn't carry this child to full term. She was, it was very early on, and she miscarried. And I was asking her, like, are you really, like, how do you feel? Like, are you really sad about it? And her answer really struck me, because she said, Tiffany, as a woman, once you feel life inside you, you do not want to part from it. So I wonder about the grief of a miscarriage, because it's not something that we talk about a lot. More people have been talking about it, thankfully, but it was my own ignorance that I did not connect it to, oh, you really grieve this loss.